Asclepius was a god of medicine in ancient Greek religion and mythology. Asclepius represents the healing aspect of the medical arts. His daughters are Hygeia, Iaso, Aso, Aglaea, Eagle, and Panacea. He was associated with the Roman, Etruscan god Vediovige. He was one of Apollo's sons, sharing with Apollo the epithet Paean. The rod of Asclepius, a snake-entwined staff, remains a symbol of medicine today. Those physicians and attendants who served this god were known as the Therapeutai of Asclepius. Etymology. The etymology of the name is unknown. In his revised version of Frisk's Griechisches Etymologisches Wörterbuch, S.P. Beeks gives this summary of the different attempts. H. Greywar in Asclepios, Apollon Smintheus A. Rudra 1949, explains the name as the mole hero, connecting sigma kappa alpha lambda omicron psi, sigma pi alpha lambda alpha chi, mole, and refers to the resemblance of the thallus in Epidaurus and the building of a mole. But the variants of Asclepios and those of the word for mole do not agree. The name is typical for pre-Greek words. Apart from minor variations for lambda alpha, we find alpha, alpha iota, followed by gamma lambda alpha pi or sigma kappa lambda alpha pi, sigma chi lambda alpha pi, beta, i.e., a voiced vela or a voiceless vela with a sigma. I think that the sigma renders an original affricate, which was lost before the gamma. Cimmerane's etymology from hit, asula, well-being, and pia, give cannot be correct, as it does not explain the vela. Beeks suggested a pre-Greek protoform ***. Mythology. Birth. He was the son of Apollo and, according to the earliest accounts, immortal woman named Coronis. His mother was killed for being unfaithful to Apollo and was laid out on a funeral pyre to be consumed. But the unborn child was rescued from her womb. From this he received the name Asclepios. To cut open education, Apollo carried the baby to the centaur Chiron, who raised Asclepius and instructed him in the art of medicine. It is said that in return for some kindness rendered by Asclepius, a snake licked Asclepius' ears clean and taught him secret knowledge. Asclepius bore a rod wreathed with a snake, which became associated with healing. To this day, a species of non-venomous pan-Mediterranean serpent, the Aesculapian snake, is named for the god. Asclepius became so proficient as a healer that he surpassed both Chiron and his father, Apollo. Asclepius was therefore able to evade death and to bring others back to life from the brink of death and beyond. This caused an influx of human beings, and Zeus resorted to killing him to maintain balance in the numbers of the human population. Wives and offspring. Asclepius was married to Epina, with whom he had 5 daughters: Hygeia, Panacea, Aso, Iaso, and Aglaea, and 3 sons: Machaon, Podalerios, and Telesphorus. He also sired a son, Aratus, with Aristodema. The names of his daughters each rather transparently reflect a certain subset of the overall theme of good health. At some point, Asclepius was among those who took part in the Calydonian boar hunt. Death. Zeus killed Asclepius with a thunderbolt because he brought Hippolytus back alive from the dead and accepted gold for it. Other stories say that Asclepius was killed because after bringing people back from the dead, Hades thought that no more dead spirits would come to the underworld, so he asked his brother Zeus to stop him. This angered Apollo, who in turn killed the Cyclopes who made the thunderbolts for Zeus. For this act, Zeus suspended Apollo from the night sky and commanded Apollo to serve Admetus, king of Thessaly, for a year. Once the year had passed, Zeus brought Apollo back to Mount Olympus and revived the Cyclopes that made his thunderbolts. After Asclepius' death, Zeus placed his body among the stars as the constellation Ophiuchus. Some sources also stated that Asclepius was later resurrected as a god by Zeus to prevent any further feuds with Apollo. It was also claimed that Asclepius was instructed by Zeus to never revive the dead without his approval again. Sacred places and practices. The most famous temple of Asclepius was at Epidaurus in northeastern Peloponnese, dated to the 4th century BC. Another famous healing temple was built approximately a century later on the island of Kos, where Hippocrates, the legendary father of medicine, may have begun his career. Other Asclepia were situated in Trikala, Gortys, and Pergamum in Asia. From the 5th century BC onwards, the cult of Asclepius grew very popular and pilgrims flocked to his healing temples to be cured of their ills. Ritual purification would be followed by offerings or sacrifices to the god, and the supplicant would then spend the night in the holiest part of the sanctuary, the abaton. Any dreams or visions would be reported to a priest who would prescribe the appropriate therapy by a process of interpretation. Some healing temples also used sacred dogs to lick the wounds of sick petitioners. In honor of Asclepius, a particular type of non-venomous snake was often used in healing rituals, and these snakes, the Aesculapian snakes, slithered around freely on the floor in dormitories where the sick and injured slept. These snakes were introduced at the founding of each new temple of Asclepius throughout the classical world. The original Hippocratic Oath began with the invocation, "I swear by Apollo the physician and by Asclepius and by Hygeia and Panacea and by all the gods." Some later religious movements claimed links to Asclepius. In the 2nd century AD, the controversial miracle worker Alexander claimed that his Goglycon, a snake with a head of linen, was an incarnation of Asclepius. The Greek language rhetorician and satirist Lucian produced the work Alexander the False Prophet to denounce the swindler for future generations. He described Alexander as having a character made up of lying, trickery, perjury, and malice. It was facile, audacious, venturesome, diligent in the execution of its schemes, plausible, convincing, masking as good, and wearing an appearance absolutely opposite to its purpose. In Rome, the College of Aesculapius and Hygeia was an association that served as a burial society and dining club that also participated in imperial cult. The botanical genus Asclepias is named after him and includes the medicinal plant A. tuberosa or pleurisy root. Asclepius was depicted on the reverse of the Greek 10,000 drachmas banknote of 1995 to 2001. In popular culture, Asclepius was seen in Marvel Comics where he appeared in Ares number 4. Asclepius is mentioned by Hercules in the Hercules. In The Apple, Hercules told Iolaus that Asclepius often said, "An apple a day keeps Asclepius away," and that he never quite knew what was meant by that. In Centaur-Mentor Journey, Asclepius was one of the students mentored by the centaur Ceridian. When Ceridian was dying, Hercules suggested that Asclepius might be able to help. Ceridian knew better. In the fantasy novel The Son of Neptune, the Roman Largius Vitellius Reticulus was a descendant of Asclepius. Later, in The Blood of Olympus, a novel from the same series, Asclepius was mentioned by Apollo, his father, when Leo Valdez speaks to him. The god himself appears when Leo, Piper McLean, and Jason Grace visit his office to retrieve the physician's cure, which can bring the recently deceased back to life. He quickly diagnoses Jason with myopia and gives him a pair of glasses. Later, he uses the Pylorsian mint and the Machae to formulate the physician's cure and gives the trio instructions on its use. In the short story, The Two Temples by Herman Melville, the narrator, hired by a lady as a personal physician, describes his job as the post of private Aesculapius and nightly companion. In the manga Saint Seiya, Next Dimension, the Ophiuchus Gold Saint is loosely based on the figure of Asclepius, since it is said that he was regarded as a god and had the power to heal others, which is why the gods punished him and erased his existence. In the Trauma Center, multiple protagonists of the game hold an inherited ability called the Healing Touch, which is said to be an ability originally held by Asclepius. Asclepius is alluded to in a Mars Volta song, Asclepios. The song makes mention of both undeath and resurrection.